having poor social connection is as harmful to your physical health as being an alcoholic, and twice as harmful as obesity. So literally there's all of these wildly scary stats around what loneliness can do.
Betties, I am so excited this week for my conversation. Welcome, Radha, to the podcast. I'm so happy to have you here.
It's so great to be here, Stephanie. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, we were just having a little bit of fun in the pre-chat and we were just kind of getting into all the stuff. And I was like, okay, we got to start because this is such good, juicy stuff. And you and I, we've sort of had these different, I met you through a mutual friend, Jim Quick. And then I was saying to you in the pre-chat, I've also been to a Daybreakers in person. I went before I was practicing, I had a brick and mortar practice and I went to this like 6 a.m. like dance party on King Street in Toronto. And then I sauntered off to start my my patients at 7:30. It was really great. And now I was introduced to you again through Giovanni, my partner, who I know you and him have a lot of serendipitous synchronicities. So happy to have you here. We're gonna have a great conversation.
Couple, and it's just so nice to be reconnected. And we're all in it together.
Yeah. 100%. So we're gonna talk about Daybreaker. We're gonna talk about Dose. We're gonna talk about your book, Belong. But before we get into some of those really juicy tenets around community and feeling like we belong, I would love to, if we can, because what you do is very unique. You don't often meet someone that's like, hey, you know what? I have this 500,000, 600,000 person community, and what I used to do before the pandemic was I would have these huge parties in the morning. Like it's very, you don't go to, your guidance counselor in high school, like, this is what I want to do. So I would love to sort of understand a little bit more about your history and your upbringing and some of these different influences and different stages of your life that really brought you to what Daybreaker was and how it's evolved with time. So let's talk a little bit about, your upbringing, where, I know you're multicultural, multi-ethnic upbringing. Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I'm born and raised in Montreal, Canada, Canadian, and my father's from India, my mother's from Japan. So sushi curry combo, but really very spiritual in just the way they raised us. And I just think that two transplants from different parts of the world, both of them English as their second language, coming to Canada and starting their own course, building a family with no kind of relatives to support them. They had to build community for themselves. And so I just watched them, really courageously create community and invite us into that whole process of, our home becoming kind of Grand Central Station, to invite the neighborhood kids and invite the Indian community, the Japanese community to come over and just connect. And so, my childhood was very much, in some ways, very traditional, very, very kind of strict Indian. You must be a doctor or lawyer type household.
Why did you get 85%? Why wasn't it 95? Yeah.
Like literally my dad
Yes.
pulled me out of basketball because I got a 90% average. And if I got below 95, I could only play one sport at a time. So anyways, like that type of strictness. Like there was a sign at the bottom of my stairs that said "No boys upstairs," like stuff like that. Very, very Indian, very Japanese, but also very non-traditional in that they married each other in the 1970s, where interracial marriages were frowned upon, and socioeconomically they're from different, sort of different backgrounds as well. So it was just a very inspiring couple to just, look up to. And they took us to India and Japan when we were 10. It's my first time going to our parent countries. And I saw so many just life-changing things that moment I'll never forget, like homeless children on this on the train stations of India with elephantitis on their feet, begging for money and food, and pickpockets, just all these things that you would never experience in Canada. And then going to Japan and just seeing the stoicism of the Japanese and just the culture shock of the two worlds going all inside of 2 months, first India then Japan. So just kind of like those formative things I think really lent themselves to my curiosity around humans, and really connecting to different cultures, how they gather, how they connect, the rituals of cultures around the world. Um, and I lost my way in my 20s. I just think that we all kind of follow the kind of American trend. We immigrated to America when I was in college, and I went to Cornell, played soccer and the whole thing. So I just did the whole American thing for a decade, where I just assimilated. I read the kind of like the tabloids and just all the things that young women do and get lost in. I just found myself at 30 just really feeling out of belonging. So that was, like a bit of my formative life of just where and how I got my influences to start a dance community like Daybreaker that really infuses so many different cultural elements from around the world: yoga, dance, meditation, kind of rituals inside the experience, no alcohol, to really come home to the community experience, and music that really gets you in your bones. So all of that, I would say, is influenced by my upbringing. And then professionally, I've had quite a wild professional career as well. So yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about your professional career, because I think it's very interesting. There was it Super Sprouts, and then you were also a banker. Like, tell us a little bit about, because
Yeah.
those are very different. Those are very different projects. Yeah.
Totally. So, I think I always say I'm unemployable. I've never,
Yes.
growing up again, in an Indian Japanese household where I just hated following rules that my parents kind of imposed on us. I realized that I wasn't someone that could have a boss or follow any rules. Though I love mentorship and finding people that I could be mentored by. But anyway, so my first job out of college, but this is like 3 months before 9/11, was in investment banking in New York City. I trained in the Trenton and the Towers, and I'm 22 years old, my first job, fresh out of college, got a job on Wall Street to prove to my Indian father that a communications major with a minor in film get a job on Wall Street. And there I was. And the towers happened, and I was in Manhattan when the whole thing went down, and it was just like one of the most, again, life-changing experiences of my life, to be not knowing my twin sister she was working out of, we had just moved to a Midtown office. And anyway, long story short, that was a very life-changing moment in my life, where I realized, whoa, the mystery of life is you never know when it's going to end, right? Like, truly, I lost so many friends, and Aon Insurance, just the different companies that were above, the 80th floor. And it was just a wild moment for a 22-year-old to experience, And so I think that took me on the path of, what is it that I want to do? What do I want to do in my life that's going to move the needle? It's not just going to be another t-shirt business that I'm slapping on a different logo on it. And what do I want to do that's going to change the world? I just lived through a world-changing moment. And so we just started looking at diet and children's, diets, and how humans eat, how Americans eat, 100 football stadiums, fields of pizza every day, and just like how we're an unhealthy culture. And as a newfound American, really proud of being an American, from Canada, I just wanted to really make a difference. So opened a first gluten-free, farm-to-table organic pizzeria in New York with my sister. And then shortly after that, from the children's menu that I created for the restaurants, where kids would never order vegetables for their pizzas, I created these characters called the Super Sprouts, that were on the children's menu. And then kids would come in, they would color in the characters, and then they'd run to the countertop to order vegetables for their pizzas. And that's how I built my next business. And I audited the kids' business. I was like, wow, there's nothing in the space that teaches kids about food. Back in 2008, 2007, that wasn't sort of, Sesame Street teaching about literacy, kept planning about teaching about the environment, nothing was teaching kids about food. So I started on that path, not as a mom, just as a citizen. So I got a lot of flack from lots of moms about that. But yeah, I raised $5 million for that business, banged down every door I could find. And somehow I found myself in this wild Super Sprouts experience, working with Michelle Obama, working with Chef Sam Kass, the White House, working with in the halls of government, education, media and entertainment, parenting, food systems. Like, it was just a wild adventure. And then I had a hostile takeover. So my investors took my business away from me. I was
How old were you?
I was 29
29.
and just about to turn 30. No, 30. Well, when the hospital takeover happened, it was actually, no, sorry. I started Super Sprouts when I was 29, and then the hospital takeover happened when I was 34. 35, and this is just 7 years ago, you know. So I had my baby, my firstborn child, like real like baby, just stripped away from me. It was one of the most dark moments, like sort of dark nights of the soul, that I had to go through. But what was wild was that just a year prior, I started Daybreaker, which is this early morning dance party, this experience to spread joy to citizens of New York. And then it became a global community very quickly. But started this dance community as a social experiment to let my hair down in the sort of throes of entrepreneurship, of building Super Sprouts, of all the different stakeholders that we had to invite in to start a media company for children in the food industry. And so I would just go out to nightclubs, and I was like, wow, the nightlife experience is so overrun by drugs and alcohol, and everybody kind of feeling like predatory environment for women, and just unsafe, and just everyone on their cell phones, and very
And my shirts would always get ruined because someone's cigarette would
it's,
always get my shirt. And I was like, I want to wear a nice outfit,
that's
but
right.
it's going to get ruined.
That's right.
Yeah.
Or a spilt drink on you, which would happen to
Right.
me constantly. Like that was
Right.
the thing that was sort of, I was like, if I get another spilt drink on myself, I'm going, because I'm small, I'm 5'2". So I just would like, it just, I would be at drink level, you know? Anyway, and so I just like, what if we turned nightlife on its head? What if we created an experience that was so inviting, so inclusive, at a time of day when we all wanted to be awake in the morning, not at night, we could pop ourselves up on some new designer drug to stay up? But what if we did it in the morning? What if we took away alcohol? What if we added green juice? What if we made it an amalgam of wellness and nightlife, and brought these two worlds together, and do it, with performative elements like fire spinners and aerialists and break dancers and violinists and sax players and all these different elements at 6 a.m. on a weekday morning before going to work. Like, what would that experience be like for people to have this wild pop of joy, a wild pop of collective joy before going to work? How would that change their day? How would that change their meetings? How would that change how they make decisions in their companies? And that saved my life when I had the hostile takeover. I just dove headfirst. I honestly am still unpacking the betrayal, the sadness, the loss of that whole 5 years of my life with nothing to show for it. I'm still kind of slowly unpacking it today. But Daybreaker, and seeing and building this joyous community, and growing it around the world, saved my mental health, my life. And then today, that's what I do. I'm the CEO of Daybreaker, and we're 7 years in, and we've grown the community to 30 cities around the world. We're a community of 500,000 members, and we spread joy at sunrise. And it's just this wild community of go-getters and doers and entrepreneurs and creatives and people who are willing to say F yes, to wake up at a wild time, to get dressed up, put glitter on their face, and go dance at the top of the World Trade Center, or the Museum of Natural History, or the Sydney Opera House, or the Smithsonian, or once at the White House even. So yeah, it's been just such a beautiful gift to be a steward of this community. And the way it's healed me has been just so magical.
I
Yeah.
love that. And you said something really important that I just wanted to double click on, was this idea of spreading joy. And I was saying to you in the pre-chat, when I would speak to my female clients, I had a female patient coming in, maybe she was experiencing back pain, or we are doing some nutrition program with her. And I would say, okay, we'd sit her down and say, what are some of the things that you're doing in your life for stress management? Like, what are some of the things that bring you joy? And like I said to you in the pre-chat, like they would be like, okay, doc, like I know the word you're using, like I understand that it's the English language. I know what you're referring to, but what do you mean? So I love this idea of using dance, and you talk about this in your book Belong. So you're the CEO of Daybreaker, and you've also wrote a book around this idea of community building and belonging. So what is it about dancing? And maybe we can talk a little bit about like what you call dosing and dosing your joy. What are some of the things that create the experience of joy in terms of a Daybreaker experience, whether it's, online, with, and we can talk a little bit about how the pandemic maybe has changed the business model temporarily, but online and also in real life, what does that look like?
Yeah, so I think, so the first thing is to just underline the importance of collective joy. And so the individual joy is one piece and collective joy is another piece. And I think so much of the personal development space, so much of the online kind of like, workout and online just meetup space is sort of kind of in many ways the individual joy space. And working on yourself, working on going in. I call it, you have to go in to go out, so it's going in to really excavate joy, to understand just all your past and what makes you you, to be able to excavate real joy. And I can go into just a second, but there's the individual joy and the collective joy. And collective joy is what happens when you gather. It's why there's electricity at at a concert, or when you go to a wedding, or when you go to the office, with other people. We're not just working remotely. There's a collective joy that is sensorial, that is felt through all of your senses, not just your eyes that are looking at Zoom, or your ears that are listening to Zoom recordings, but your entire energetic being, your touch, your smell, your taste, all of yourself is being fully activated. So that's how you unlock real joy, is to really understand just our brains and how our brains work. And so, you and I can nerd out about this for days and days, but I can just share the first thing that we that I looked at through the lens of joy, and it's your 4 happy neurochemicals in your brain, which I coined, actually I termed dose, which I couldn't believe no one had put that together, but it was like, our 4 happy neurochemicals spells out the word dose. Dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, and endorphins spells out the word dose. So we can literally dose ourselves on our own natural supply. I mean, that's what's so wild. And so what we did was, as we developed Daybreaker, and since our membership to Practice Joy, we just really unlocked and sort of like reverse engineered, what is it that makes a human happy? Okay, great. So these 4 neurochemicals, how can we design an experience where people will experience that release of their 4 happy neurochemicals? And that's where it becomes super exciting. And if every experienced designer, community architect, leader thought about their team, their gatherings through the lens of releasing your dose, it would change the way we gather, it would change the way we design experiences. It just would completely shift the way we think about happiness and joy. It's through the lens of our brain and our bodies connecting, finding coherence between our brains and our bodies. And we can't cut joy off at our necks. We can't just be felt in our heads. It has to be felt in our bodies. And so often when you go to therapy or you go to anybody, they always say, okay, let's work on your mental health. But no, it's your mental and your physical health. I call it your net brain body happiness score, to really look at everything in your life through the lens of your net brain body happiness score. When you're doing a high intensive interval training, New York Times just reported literally last week that it's actually bad for you because it creates heart arrhythmia, it stresses your body, it spikes cortisol. There's all these negative things that happen with HIIT training. And yet everybody's doing HIIT training because they want the shortcut to get a sculpted body. So there's so many new things coming out around, no, just do sustained, gentle movement practices, which we call joy practice. So what kind of sustained things that you can do every day that you look forward to doing? That's not going to be something you do one time in a week, but your body is so spent that you wait 2 more weeks to do the next workout. What are the things that you can do every day gently to your body that elicits and inspires a release of your dose, right? Your 4 happy neurochemicals, and that makes you feel good, makes you feel happy, that makes you glisten, that makes you connect to yourself and to one another. So we've done so much research around the individual joy practice and the collective joy experience.
I love that. So let's spend just a few moments describing. So you said dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, endorphins. How do we, if someone were asking themselves, okay, how am I going to get each of these things in my daily life? So you've been talking about sustained movement, but what might be some of the questions or what might be some of the practices that someone might be looking to do to release dopamine, for example? And then we can go through each of them in succession.
So dopamine is all about pleasure reward, right? It's like the ding on your phone, unfortunately, that creates the addiction, the dopamine addiction, that you want the likes, the dings, the messaging, right? But dopamine really is when you find focus and inspiration. It's when you're in flow state. It's when you are getting things done off your list. That's dopamine. So a daybreaker, we cultivate dopamine by literally making it at 6 a.m. so that the act of waking up early to go somewhere when the sun isn't even up yet, there's a dopamine rush of, oh my gosh, I'm getting dressed, I'm going to this thing. There's 500 people that's going to go to this thing. There's a dopamine rush of that. You also get dopamine when you're listening to music, when you're finding flow state, when you're inspired. All of these. So we organize also our joy practices through the lens of the 8 virtues of joy, of which 2 of them are for each neurochemical. So dopamine is flow and inspiration are the 2 virtues of joy connected to dopamine. So we have all these practices that connect with finding flow state, finding inspiration, through brain body movement practices like qigong and tapping and forest bathing and meditation and yoga and dancing, and all these different practices that you can do to actually activate your dopamine. Oxytocin is your trust hormone, it's your cuddle hormone, it's your intimacy hormone. It's what you feel when you feel that exhale of, I'm home with somebody, right? And so we call that the 2 virtues under oxytocin are courage and connection, because it takes courage to be trusting someone. It takes courage to connect with other people. It takes courage to find intimacy with your body, with yourself, and with other people, right? And then the connection side is, of course, such an important part of a joy practice is how do you actually connect with other people? We cannot survive or thrive without belonging. It's our root chakra. It's what we need to survive and thrive as a species. And so connection is a deeply important part of a joy practice and a deeply important virtue of joy. And then the serotonin, which is all around gratitude and ease. It's your mood stabilizer. So when you think of people who have anxiety and depression, it's often because they're low on serotonin, right? So when we think of the opposite, when you're filled with serotonin, it's when you're feeling easeful, when you're feeling joyful, when you're feeling playful, when you're feeling in gratitude. Those are all serotonin experiences. And you can get that just by smiling. Just even if you're fake smiling, if you fake smile for 5 seconds, you're actually inspiring a release of serotonin. So you can do that when you're having a bad day. Just smile and you're just like, let me get through this. And your body dumps serotonin and you feel immediately better. Same thing with taking deep breaths in and out. That's a serotonin release as well. We have multiple dose breaths that we share around that. And serotonin is connected to gratitude and play under the 8 virtues of joy, gratitude and play. And then the final dose neurochemical is E. It's endorphins, and endorphins is all about the runner's high. It's the euphoria that you get from working out, from moving your body, from sweating, from glistening. It's that feeling of awe. So the 2 virtues of joy are awe and play. So sorry, awe. Oh my gosh. Euphoria and awe. Thank you. Euphoria and awe. So those are the 2 virtues under virtues of joy under endorphins. So it's a beautiful way to just think about neurochemistry. It's about your brain. Is like, how does it actually impact you emotionally? Oh, I can be more inspired. Oh, I can be more in flow state. Oh, I can find more gratitude. So these are all the things that we think about when we think about brain body practices.
And I love the way that you've deconstructed this because I think, back to the original, like people like, I know you're using the English word, I understand it, but I don't get it. This is where we can start to say, oh, okay, so how can I have courage today? How can I foster connection? And I think, the Daybreaker in its original form that I attended was this in person. It was so much fun, the best music ever. People were all dolled up, like all in costumes. But of course, now we have this pandemic. And I was saying to you in the pre-chat, like the worst word that they possibly could have chosen was social distancing. When I think it's more accurate to say, we're physically distancing, the 3 feet or the 6 feet or whatever the number is. So how has this changed? So how the Daybreaker model, how has that morphed? You've been talking a little bit about your online platform for joy, Dose. So maybe talk a little bit about how, if someone's listening to this, how they can begin to, without maybe having access to going to a Daybreaker or even just going to a meetup like meetup.com. When I first moved to New York City, that's actually how I met my friends. Like I went to meetup.com. I was new, same thing, from Toronto, moving to New York first time, had no idea. No, I knew no one. So how can we begin to foster this connection? And maybe you can walk us through, some of the feedback that you've heard from, because it's really scary, right? Like moving to a new place or now being isolated, like that is if there's a pandemic, it's the mental health crisis, the suicides, the depression, the lack of connection, that I think that we're really going to
One in
see.
four Americans have zero friends to confide in, and this number has tripled in the last 30 years. And with the pandemic, it's now 1 in 2.5 people have zero friends with whom to share confidential feelings with.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
when you add marriage to it, that number goes even lower, right? Because most people just give all of their emotional selves to their partner, their husband or wife, particularly men. And so we're living in an extremely scary time. And also having poor social connection is as harmful to your physical health as being an alcoholic and twice as harmful as obesity. So literally there's all of these wildly scary stats around what loneliness can do. Suicide rates are through the roof right now. Opioid epidemic is through the roof. And gun violence, all these things ladder down to I don't belong, right? So belonging is the most important thing to cultivate. It's not a thing to do, oh, once I got to get the job, oh, once I have the romance, let me then focus on my community. Community is the first thing to focus on, and how you do it is by first getting to know yourself, right? So in my book, I the first half of the book is about going in. I did this for myself when I turned 30 and I looked at myself in the mirror. This is when I lost myself, my path in my 20s. And I was like living for the tabloids and being cool and like wanting to be like what society wanted me to be like and not following my authentic truth. So I sat down at 30th birthday and I just said, who am I, Radha? Like, who do I want? Like, what are the qualities that I want in a friend? What are the qualities I don't want in a friend? I wrote down 3 columns. This is in my book actually as an exercise. But column 1 is, what are the qualities I'm looking for in a friend? What are the qualities I don't want in a friend? What are the qualities that I need to embody so that I can attract the friends that I want? So, what are the things that I value today? I did a via chart. What are the things I value today in my life? What are the things I'm interested in exploring, like you did on Meetup? What are the things that I'm good at? What are my abilities that I can bring to a community? Maybe I'm great at creating spaces for people. Maybe I'm great at bringing instruments or candles somewhere. Maybe I'm great at cooking for people. Maybe what are my skills that I can bring to a community that I can then begin to just unpack in my own life that brings me joy. And then we'll go out and find the community. Let's excavate how we're showing up. What does our energy look like? I have several exercises that talk about your energy. Like, how is your energy when you show up to places? Are you withdrawn? Are you excited, enthusiastic? Are you shit talking? What's your vibe? And I should call it an triple E, an equal energy exchange. You want to find friends that give you an equal energy exchange. It's not going to be energy vampires or where you're giving all of yourself and getting nothing in return, right? So all of this audit you want to just begin doing and then plot out where in my life is my energy feeling drained? Oh, at work, my colleagues are really making me feel crappy. Oh, at home, I'm totally fueled up. Maybe it's time for me to change my jobs or create an environment and be the change in my office to create an environment where there's a better energy. So that audit initially in yourself is so important, because then the going out part of going to meet up and doing what I call the 4 phases of community, where you start out on the exploratory phase on the outside of the bullseye, and you're just exploring all these communities that you're interested in connecting with. It just becomes so much easier to pinpoint what are the communities I want to explore based on my today's values, based on my today's interests, based on my today's abilities, and so there is a sort of quiet step-by-step strategy that I did for my own life that's worked for now, hundreds of thousands of other people that I've supported and shared with. But it's like, it's kind of like, where do I start? And that's why, I wrote the book, and that's why I share this so with so much passion, because when you don't belong, it is debilitating. It's excruciatingly painful. When you're left out, it's as painful as having a broken leg, truly. Studies have shown. So for me, like, helping people experience sense of belonging the way I came around from I don't belong at 30 it took me 3 years to really find my tribe. And I was patient with it. I went through all the different practices. I stuck with it. And then I found my community of people that was equal energy exchange, that were interested in the same things that I was interested in. And then all of a sudden, because my energy was so authentic, I kept radiating out, and it happened faster and faster. So meeting new friends who were aligned with my values became easier and easier and faster. And I'm going through it again. I'm 42 now. Everyone's left New York City. I'm kind of back in this, okay, I have a dozen friends left in New York City, maybe like 4 really good friends. I'm back in this rebuild mode, and I'm excited about it. And I'm excited to redo all my exercises in my book and rechart all the things of who's here in proximity to me, while all my friends are now around the country, around the world. So I think we're all doing this work, including the authors of the books, and I'm loving it. And I'm appreciating that I have these tools now to be able to do that for myself,
I really love the 3-column exercise, and I'll share with you because it's sort of like, once you've identified your own core values, and I know you talk about like this like this sort of Venn diagram, which we'll talk about in a moment. But once you sort of know what it is that you want and who you want to be, it becomes infinitely easier for you to identify in other people. You're like, oh, we're on a green planet. There's a yellow person. There's a yellow, I see her. She's like me. So without going through that exercise, it can be like, okay, I know I like her, or I know I like him, or whatever, but I don't exactly know why. And I think identifying your values, your core values, some of your principles and things that are really important to you, are so important. And Giovanni actually did this before we had met. He actually did a very similar exercise he called it the Mrs. exercise, like who he wanted his partner to be, and what were some of the things that he really loved about himself. So when we met, he was like, oh my God, he had 50 or 51 items. And I was like 49 out of like 50, right? So it's so easy to do that. And I love that, because I get asked all the time from adult women, like, female friendships are really important to me. And I feel like I've outgrown maybe some of my high school friends, or maybe I've chosen to have children and my friends haven't, or vice versa. I haven't had kids and my friends have, and we don't, like, the commonality is waning. So what would be some of your, if you could give some tips on whether it's female friendship, that's the one I get asked about the most, like female friendships or cultivating new friendships. We talked about going in. So if we were to go out, what are some of the things that you really think are important in terms of, like, once you know what it is you want, how do you go about finding it?
So there's multiple ways, right? So the first thing that I would do, me personally, if I'm moving to a new city, would be to find a portal. And what a portal is one person or 2 people that you feel like align with your values, your interests, and what you can share with their community, right? And a portal is a generous gateway into a community of like-minded humans. And so, for example, I was a portal to, so many friends who moved to New York from their respective cities, and they would say, hey, I know one person, that's Radha. Let me call her and see if we can connect. So I would meet them and I'd be like, oh my God, you're so one of us. Like, we want to make the world a better place and blah, 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 all the different things. And I would say, okay, I'm having a dinner party with 6 friends. Why don't you come? And I would invite them to the dinner party, and then they would make friends and exchange numbers. And then boom, now they are building their community from like-minded people, right? So that's one kind of easy button route of just finding a portal in your city. It could be someone literally on Instagram that you follow, someone that you met one time that you think is really dope, that you want to connect with. Maybe you're DMing them and saying, hey, I'd love to get for coffee, or I'd love to support you as a volunteer for whatever's you're doing. Volunteering is a really wonderful way to meet a portal, to support them in whatever project that they're working on, to really connect with them. So that's one route. If you don't know a single person in a city, what I would do is, and it's again in my book, I create these, imagine like 4 circles, like a bullseye. So the outer ring of the circle is what I call the exploratory phase, where you write down based on what you value, what you're interested in today. You look up online, look up on Meetup, look up on Facebook, look up on just like on the World Wide Web, ask some people that colleagues, hey, do you know any dance communities? Do you know any entrepreneurship communities? Do you know any, joy communities that practice joy? Do you know any communities that, whatever it is you're interested in that moment, or parenting communities that have young toddler kids? Okay, let's go find those communities. Let's plot them on our exploratory outer ring of the bullseye, and then start going to those community events. And then from there, you will then begin to pinpoint, okay, I really like this entrepreneurship community. I like this joy community. I'm going to go kind of participate. So the second rung of exploration is participation. So that's when you begin saying, hey, I want to volunteer. I want to participate in making your community better. I want to support with my energy, with my intention, with my showing up more, and really begin to participate in those communities, because participation breeds belonging. You cannot participate if you only take and just show up to things. You have to show up and participate, which is why Burning Man, why Daybreaker, why all of these community events are so popular, is because people come to our events and they're dressing up in the theme. They're bringing gifts to give away. At Burning Man, people are building their art cars, they're building their camps. It's a very participatory community, which breeds, again, belonging and a sense of commitment to the community. And then from the participatory rung, you now move into the outer core community. So inside of those multiple communities that you now start participating in, you might meet 3 or 4 or 5 people that you connect with, maybe 2, who become portals for you to meet other people in their community that you might connect with. So that begins a portal invitation to other gatherings with like-minded friends. And then you find your inner core, which is the final bullseye, which is the 4 to 8 friends with whom you can go really deep with at any given time, that you can call up and they'll stop anything and show up for you. I have, fortunately, so many inner core community members, but many of them now live outside of New York, including my twin sister. So I have a huge outer core community here that I'm beginning to, sort of reignite and bring them back into my home for barbecues. And I'm going back into community building phase in my own life. And it's just been so much fun, and meeting new people, this can be so much fun and reigniting. So not to see it as a daunting, scary experience, but to really approach new opportunities through the lens of courage and excitement and opportunity and inspiration. For me, as a new mom at 42, I have a 2-year-old. There's a lot of variables that could make me more scared. But my mindset is so focused on how exciting this can be. And that's really what I think everyone should go into any new community building opportunity with.
And I think you have to give it time. I think that, in order to go from exploratory, if you're using your model, to participatory, to the portal, and then now you're at the inner core, I mean, and people will say, well, how long does it take? It's like, well, who knows, right? It could be 5 years, it could be 10 years, I remember, sorry. Go ahead. Go
Don't
on.
give up. I was like, don't give up. Yeah.
Don't give up, right? So it's just this slow evolution of your relationships, because even in that exploratory, when you're kind of looking for different like, you're going to meet some people and they're going to kind of just remain these outliers for a long time, and it's, in some ways, you get out what you put into it. I think that when we're younger, and even pre-pandemic, we would get these, like, it was, you could meet people in the workplace, you could go to like faith-based, you go to church or synagogue, and you'd find people with similar interests there, or people will go to the gym. Like, that's a big thing that many places are still closed. So people that are interested in fitness and healthy living, so now we're all sort of divorced from that. But as you've been saying, give yourself some time, and then you also are a portal in a way that you have this online platform. So as sort of a bridge until we
Mm.
can all get back into real life, tell us a little bit about your online programming and what that does.
Yeah. So, during pandemic, thank you, Stephanie. Yeah. I'm like, so during the pandemic, when we had to shut down all of our live events, we started getting emails from community members sharing how their siblings were committing suicide, where their friends were in deep depressions, where people were feeling the deepest levels of isolation they'd ever experienced, and going back to alcohol and substance abuse and all these things. So instead of just saying, all right, taking the year off, we said, let's pivot to live stream dance parties. So we've done 24 dance parties online. We've had over 200,000 people join, over 24 episodes. And it's a Zoom party, but we found all this technology that could really create an intimate experience on Zoom to make it feel as connected as if you're in a dance party together. And then from there, we pivoted again, because we said, we only do these dance parties now once or twice a month online. So we were like, how do we actually serve and support our community members every single day? So we said, what if we created the first ever joy practice? It's what makes me so happy. So what are the practices that I do, that my friends do, that my people I look up to, my teachers do, in the space of practicing joy? And I looked around, I was like, oh my gosh, there's like literally no platform out there where you can practice how to be a more joyful person using your brain and your body. So moving, like with movement modalities. So we began doing all this research over the last many years, 2 years, to try to understand what are the most potent joy practices on the planet. So qigong and tapping and forest bathing, from Japan to, of course, meditation, to dance, of course, collective joy, all these different modalities, right? And so we brought them all into one place where you can, they're gentle daily movements that you can do in a community that you can actually make like-minded humans to practice joy with, from all around the country, all around the world. We have a Facebook community, we have a Zoom community, we have now launching IRL again on May 12th to get everybody together and meeting for the first time, many of whom joined our membership during COVID, and have not met each other. So it's going to be such a wonderful reunion for everybody to meet each other for the first time. But yeah, Dose is really exciting. We partnered with the Greater Good Science Center out of Berkeley, California, to do all the science behind it. We developed the first ever happiness quiz, where you could basically you answer 40 questions, and it's like, Stephanie, based on your answers, these are the 4 neurochemicals. This is your score on your neurochemicals, and what you need more support in to give you more oxytocin, more connection, more endorphins, more movement practices. Like, here are the things that you personally can do more of on this platform based on your happiness needs. And so it's been really, really cool to create a place where everyone gets their own journey, where we unlock it through the 8 virtues of joy, again, that we developed with the Greater Good Science Center, and through our research on what are the most potent values and virtues of joy. And then create a community around it, so people can meet and find their portal there, and find their community and find their friends there. And we're over 1,000 community members now, in 12 weeks since we've launched. And it's been just such a beautiful thing to go from, 500,000 people coming to dance parties in the morning to back to 1,000 community members to build this kind of membership community, who are coming together every day, or once a week or however often they can, to practice joy together. So it's been such a beautiful renaissance, in every way for us. Yeah.
I love that. And you're sort of like when we think about mob mentality, you're sort of like the joy mob mentality, right? Like you're trying to like push
Collective joy.
collective joy. There it is again. And have you had any, I mean, 12 weeks is still quite early, but has there been any research or data or at least patterns that are emerging that you're hearing from your members?
Oh my gosh, it's unbelievable. We're getting, I mean, and you can see on the comments, and they're all public on the website, but it's unbelievable the transformation people are having by starting their day with a joy practice when so much of the fitness industry is so intimidating. And so people will kind of shame talk themselves or feel insecure or compare their own bodies to what it looked like 3 months ago. There's so many different things that we do to ourselves as women, especially. So to have a truly inclusive place to practice joy, practice self-love, kindness is one of the virtues. By the way, I didn't mention it, but it's one of the 8 virtues, under serotonin. But anyway, but yeah, to have it, to just be able to create a space for people to just to say to us, I was abusing substances and I'm now finally again clean because of dose. I was in the depths of my loneliness in this community. I have now 3 Zoom dates, 3 walking dates in the woods, 3, all these different things are happening inside of our community. I mean, there's hundreds and hundreds of messages, from our community members sharing their transformations and how they're more joyful and how and joy is contagious and how their joy is translating to their family and to their colleagues and to their neighbors and to their community, and how collective joy makes you smarter, healthier, more intuitive. Just all of these things happen when you're actually practicing collective joy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that. And I think, when I always say like community is my immunity, like you want a
Yes.
good, robust immune system, you need to be around other people. And like you said, we could geek it, but we are neurologically hardwired to be with other people. And that's why, when we think about torture, when we think about what people do to torture, they will self-isolate. They'll put people in isolation cells by themselves because that's like people go mad that way. So I love everything that you're doing here. And one of the things that I think is so important in terms of your work is you've not only created a community, so you've not only sort of deconstructed the way that you yourself have people that you trust, like those inner core people, but you're also now creating community for other people, which is so important for once you have I almost think it's not a moral obligation, but kind of,
It
where
is
you
beauty.
are created for other people now. Like you can sit with us. Like here's more benches for you to come, right?
Right. That's right. And I think we work on ourselves to better serve others. And I think people forget that. We work on ourselves, we go through all this personal development process so we can better relate to others, how we can better connect with others. And humans are happiest serving other people, right? And so I think in our constant sort of like coaching environment where everybody's constantly, in self-observation, we forget the reason we self-observe is that we can actually be better humans, with other people. And I think that's really it for me. It's like, I think once I found my community, I found the deepest level of joy and belonging and that exhale of I'm home. That was when I said, okay, how can we transform our city? How can we transform our country? How can we transform the world? What if every single person went from feeling the way I did, out of belonging, lonely, to completely in belonging, completely overjoyed, wanting to serve and support other people. Of course, ups and downs, in all of it. And communities, there's a lot of conflict in community as well that you have to learn how to resolve, that I stumbled through as well, that I figured out and write about in my book as well. All the ways in which we can repair communities when there's a fracture, repair relations. We don't cancel each other in this cancel culture that we live in. But yeah, I mean, it's so important to take our own lessons and share that, because it ripples forward and it'll come back to you, and you'll be like, oh wow, the bodega, or like our president is much nicer. Oh wait, it's because your ripple of kindness rippled out and it reached the halls of government, and that's now returning back to you. So we don't realize just how deep and wide one person's joy impact, one person's community impact, one person's sense of belonging can impact the rest of the world.
I love that so much. And as someone who has sort of felt from, I'm Portuguese and Lebanese. So like not quite Portuguese, not quite Lebanese, lots of different languages, moved Montreal, Toronto. So I've been to Montreal as well. Always felt like I didn't quite fit in. So I loved, and I was captured from your book from the very first sentence where you're like, I realized I didn't belong. And I just loved the sort of story arc that you take people through in the book. It's a very interesting, also, it's very unlike any book I've ever, there's like art, there's, you're reading and it's like a picture of a keyhole and there's, hearts and, diagrams. It's so fun to read.
I illustrated it too, actually, with my friend.
Did you? Oh, you did such a great job, really. And I think that this is such an important concept for us to get. One of my very good friends, James Mescal, he's a functional medicine provider. He was on the podcast talking about loneliness, how it is a epidemic. And as you've been saying, there is so much evidence in terms of our neurobiology that is negatively affected when we are not in community. So I just love everything that you've created. We'll make sure that we have the platform for Joy Dose. We're going to have it in the show notes. And any sort of last, parting words, like, is there something that if there's one, we've talked a lot about a lot of great things today, but if there's one sort of idea that you want to leave people with, other than, community is the most important thing, right? Is there anything else you'd like to leave as we're signing off?
Yeah, I just think that now is the time to do that, kind of that spring cleaning of who are the energies in your world that are not serving you? Who are the energies in the world that you've been grandfathering in? Who are the energies in the world that you've been making excuses for and allowing them into your space? And this is the time to do this audit. This is the time to do this deep soul searching work. This is the time to practice joy so that you can really live in the way that you are meant and deserve to live. And that's what I want to leave people with. It's just that.
I love that. This has been such an awesome conversation, Radha. Thank you for taking the time.
Thanks for having me, Stephanie.
Dr. Stephen Gundry is the video that's coming up next for you. Just click right here. We're talking about the microbiome, energy, postbiotics, mitochondria, and how to get your energy back.
Continuous ketosis, 24 hours, 7 days a week, 365 days a year is really dumb.